Hello everyone, and happy Halloween! Today we have a very spooky Mirror Dungeon solo video, and of course, what's spookier than vampires? We'll be using the brand new Bloodfiend Priest of La Mancha Land, Gregor. He is quite literally the tankiest identity in the game, when it comes to base stats alone, having only 10 HP more than the previous one, K-Corp Hong Lu. In fact, these two identities are incredibly similar, as both of them are nigh unkillable. Of course, K-Corp Hong Lu is still the king of immortality, but Priest Gregor certainly gives him a run for his money. This is entirely due to his skill 3, which at maximum power is capable of healing him for nearly 200 health. A single use of this is capable of taking him from near death to perfectly healthy in an instant. And if that wasn't enough, his passive allows him to cheat death a single time, letting him mimic K-Corp's multiple health bars if he uses a skill 3 right after. The main reason his healing and health are so good is because he does more damage to himself than the enemies can. Every time he uses any skill, he applies a ton of self-bleed, which is more than capable of chunking his massive health pool. Despite being dangerous and needing a little bit of skill in order to keep him alive, this is mostly a good thing. With his self-bleed being such a large amount, it really helps to stack up Blood Feast quickly and enable other Bloodfiend identities. It certainly helps that he doesn't really use Blood Feast himself, only being able to consume it with his skill 2 after some time has passed. Before then, he gains his status of Bloodied Hand passively, allowing the other Bloodfiends to thrive off of his sacrifice. Aside from that, his bleed support is pretty decent. He has a total of 4 bleed count between his skill 2 and 3, which is certainly not the best, but it's not awful either. He also has Rupture 2 for some reason, but doesn't support it in the slightest, so it's just really there for a tiny bit of bonus damage. His real support though is for Blood Feast, and while he can be used outside of Bloodfiend teams, he really doesn't want to. Starting the run off, we take Wound Clarid and Little and Tubby Naughty Plushie for our starting gifts, and head into Flat Broke Gamblers for the first floor. This floor was a little bit of a challenge. Gregor is fatal to pierce damage, which there is plenty of here, and with his healing essentially being tied to his skill 3, we are at the mercy of RNG as to whether or not we can actually survive certain turns. With that said though, when it comes to the boss itself, we are more a danger to ourselves than they are. One of the biggest things when it comes to this identity is that his stagger bar is significantly higher than normal, being at 80% of his health. Of course, with his huge health bar, it's not that much different than normal identities, but he is still prone to being staggered early. He also doesn't really care about being staggered much, as he can always survive thanks to his passive, but also with how much HP he has, it really doesn't feel like he's staggered when he is. For this boss specifically, we don't need to worry about getting staggered at all as we enter below the stagger threshold, but instead the problem we face is a very interesting interaction. You see, there are certain ego gifts and passives that are capable of increasing the amount of bleed potency and count you apply. The thing is, they don't actually care about who you're applying it to. This lets them activate on the Bloodfiend's self-bleed infliction. A couple that I know work like this are the ego gifts Smokes and Wires and Filial Love, as well as the support passive for Barber Otis. Her support passive was the only reason this fight was a challenge, as the turn after I kill an enemy, I would gain bleed count on top of the self-bleed. Anytime I use a skill 1 above 50% health, instead of taking 25 damage, I would be taking 75. If I just didn't bring her support passive, this fight would have been a joke. We take Blue Zippo Lighter for our reward and head into Lake World for the next floor. Here we buy Bloody Gadget, an extra skill 3, and remove Barber Otis's support passive from our lives. We also find Awe before making it to the boss against the Twin Hook Pirates. This boss is much like the previous one, except this time we're not self-imploding every time we defeat an enemy. Of course, with them also applying bleed, the stack can spiral out of control if not taken seriously, but a neat little trick you can do is if Gregor is above 50% health, he can use his defense skill to trigger the bleed stack 3 times before he adds to it with his self-bleed, thus reducing the total amount of damage taken.
아까처럼만 그럼 이번 전기도 쉽게 갈 수 있을 거야. 좋다, 좋아. 계속 집중하지. 베인인가? 영원히 잠들어.
지긋지긋한 전투가
베인인가?
괜찮은 공격이네요. 앞으로도 그렇게만 해주세요. 이제야 실력을 좀 내시네요. 이들도 이러면 얼마나 좋겠어요.
베인인가? 깨달음을 얻으시오.
모자를 쓰고 있는 사람에게 방망이에서 풍선까지 던졌네요.
너무 세게 맞은 거다.
저번에 날아가주세요.
베인인가?
We take Rusted Muzzle for our reward and head into the Crawling Abyss for the next floor. Here we fuse Respite before making it to the boss against the Skin Prophet. The Prophet and the Priest. Do you follow the light of the flame or succumb to the flow of the blood? Regardless of the answer, the Prophet is no match for the Priest. Being given the first 3 turns for free and taking almost no damage from his normal attacks, this fight was never going to be difficult. In fact, the Prophet is quite weak to bleed. Every one of his skills has 2 coins which can easily allow bleed to take out half his health bar in no time at all.
어떤 상황이 닥쳐와도 포기하지.
베인인가?
너무 무치하잖아요. 두려움을 모르는 건 나쁘지 않습니다만
베인인가?
해결사가
베인인가? 또한 용서 할 테.
보너스 스코어야.
We take the Red Stengosipium for our reward and head into the Evil Defining for the next floor. Here we buy Lithograph, Illusory Hunt, and another skill 3. We also fuse Rusted Cutting Knife before entering into the boss against Ahab.
너무 약물이신 것 같은데.
Gas Harpoon is definitely the easier of the 2 fights. All we do is allow her to stagger us on the first turn, and the rest of the fight is incredibly easy, as she never has enough damage to beat our constant healing. I was definitely more worried about the Pequod trio and kind of wish I got them instead. Even though they would have been more challenging thanks to them only having pierce attacks, I don't believe they would have been that much harder. This is how I believe that fight would have played out. Turn 1, we would clash with whatever attack is doing the most damage and get staggered. On turn 2, we either get lucky and they fail to deplete our health bar, or they do manage to deplete it and activate our passive, allowing us to survive the turn. For turn 3, we would use a defense skill to heal enough that our self-bleed won't do us in, and follow up with 2 skill 3s which restore our health back to max. At that point, they wouldn't be able to beat us, as we can clash with pretty much anything and would likely survive anything we couldn't.
죄인인가?
We take special contract for our reward and receive temporal brittle as a bonus before heading into Murder on the Warp Express for the final floor. Here we buy imposed weight and Eclipse of Scarlet Moths before heading into Force Cassetti to confess for being such a bad Bloodfiend. This fight is fairly straightforward. The beginning with all of the minions is not worth talking about at all, other than the fact that I willingly get staggered to remove my stagger bar when facing Cassetti. For the Bloodfiend himself, he was even easier this time than when we faced him with Barber Otis. Pretty much the only challenge is self-imposed, as he gains a massive offense level and clash power boost when he has a bleed stack, but even with that we can easily match him. And even when we can't, Gregor is so tanky that a few hits don't phase us at all, even when they come from very powerful attacks. Of course, the fight still does take a while. That half damage from bleed is incredibly noticeable when the mirror dungeon is buffing his health.
중인가? 피가 잔뜩 흘러넘치고 있고 한 방울이라도 괜찮으니까 내게 줘. 어머니께서 여기서 자르신다 해도.
And that's how I soloed Mirror Dungeon 4 hard using only Bloodfiend Priest Gregor, an absolutely incredible solo unit that tries his absolute hardest to mirror K-Corp Hong Lu. He's not quite at the same level, with his healing being tied to his skill 3, it can at times be unreliable, but still very good nonetheless. Aside from his monstrous health, he's also very good at supporting Bloodfiends. All the self-bleed really adds to the Blood Feast, and when used alongside others, you will really appreciate having him. Anyway, that's it from me. Like and subscribe, and happy Halloween!